Welcome to the Beck Media podcast, where we discuss all things women's hockey every week. In this episode, we'll look at expansion, off-season moves around the league, Maya Labad's unique contract, and draft pick signings. Be sure to subscribe to Beck Media and follow us on socials so you don't miss anything. Kicking off this week's episode, we're diving into the latest PWHL expansion that caused even more shakeup around the league, with 4 new teams entering the mix. After last year's process and protections left the original 6 rebuilding, the league created a new format for expansion teams to build out their rosters. However, many fans were left feeling worse about the process than in the previous year, where there was an expansion draft and the upsets came through in one night, whereas this year it stretched out over weeks and you never knew when the next hit was coming. Some teams were definitely hit harder than others, with Toronto losing 2 of their top 3 scorers amongst their scoring issues that led them to their worst finish in team history this past season, as Daryl Watts and Jesse Comfort headed to Detroit. New York also took some major hits, and as the only original 6 team to have never made the playoffs, they were left searching in the draft. After losing Corinne Schroeder in last year's expansion draft, the Sirens turned to Kaylee Osborne, who despite their record had an incredible season. However, Osborne was one of the first departures from New York, heading to Hamilton to play with Team Canada teammates, leaving New York's goalie situation back up in the air. Joining her in Hamilton is Allison Simpson, while Taylor Girard headed home to Michigan to play with Detroit. Girard was one of their top players on offense before sustaining a season-ending injury, though their biggest hit came when San Jose signed rookies Ann Trukowski and Maddie Wheeler alongside vet Kristen O'Neill. All 3 had an incredible season, leaving New York rebuilding once again. With one owner across the league heading into the process, there was limited protection for team rosters trying to keep the league as competitive as possible. However, this has shaken fan bases and loyalty, especially in cities with no team. Many fans grew up watching women's hockey on the world stage and chose their team based on the players. So as they continue to move, so does the fan loyalty. And if you talk to most fans across the league, many have multiple teams they root for, solely based on the players. So, what have teams done to recover from the expansion process? Well, Montreal has definitely been doing the most this offseason, signing Emma Malte from the Toronto Scepters and Jesse Eldridge from the Boston Fleet, which were both high-profile targets heading into this year's free agency. Doubling down on their free agent signings, they brought in veteran Michelle Karvinen from the Vancouver Golden Eyes. But what about everyone else? Well, teams like Minnesota have continued to be quiet through free agency. But why the silence? Well, the Frost's offseason efforts have focused on re-signing players that already know and fit into Ken Klee's system. After back-to-back championships, the Frost were hit hard in the first expansion. However, Ken Klee was able to rebuild the Frost and find their best regular season finish so far. And while they took another major hit in this year's expansion, they were able to keep their core in Taylor Heisey, Kelly Panic, Maddie Rooney, Grace Zumwinkle, and Lee Steckline through their protections, while also securing defender Sydney Morin, who exploded in the playoffs, scoring both goals in Game 4 to keep the Frost alive and force a Game 5 in Montreal. The silence makes sense as they look to rebuild a championship team. Training camp is most likely where we will see all these signings take place, including the draftees. The Frost aren't always the quickest to bite, however, it has paid off with them finding players who fit into their systems and work well with the team. The Boston Fleet have brought in Amanda Boulier, who is a strong veteran presence. With the Fleet losing Rattray in free agency and a young core, her leadership presence in the locker room is exactly what the Fleet were looking for. They have also brought in Taylor House from the Ottawa Charge, who has made back-to-back finals appearances While the New York Sirens looked to figure out their goalie situation, they brought in Elaine Chuli from the Toronto Scepters. This past season, she served as the backup behind Reagan Kirk. While Chuli began her PWHL career in Montreal behind Anne-Renee Desbiens and was brought to Toronto after trading starter Kristen Campbell, expected to take the net, but Kirk's strong performances earned her the net. Chuli currently sits with a 919 save percentage across 27 games in 3 seasons, bringing a strong presence to New York as they look to make their first ever playoff run. In Toronto, Blair Turnbull announced her pregnancy, leaving the Scepters looking for a veteran presence to anchor the team. And who better than Jamie Lee Rattray as the Scepters look to rebuild and make it back to the playoffs under a new coach. Heading north in the Battle of Ontario, the Ottawa Charge continued to build their young core, trading for Jenna Buglioni from the Seattle Torrent and signing free agent Dara Gregg from the Montreal Victoire. Buglioni definitely didn't get the start to her PWHL career that she was hoping for, with an injury headlining her first year. Though the forward still appeared in 18 games, but is still searching for her first PWHL point. While Dara Gregg joins her brother playing in Ottawa, becoming the second brother sister duo to play in the same city and sharing the same arena. Heading west to last year's expansion teams, the Seattle Torrent signed defender Naomi Nibruva from the Boston Fleet, who was on the reserve this season, only playing in 3 games as the Fleet managed injuries. Seattle also announced the addition of Finnish Olympian Emma Newtonen, who has been playing in the Aurora Liga since the folding of the PHF. Over the last 3 seasons, she has averaged 27 goals and 36 assists a season, bringing a strong offensive presence to the Torrent. Though the biggest move of this offseason had to be the Vancouver Golden Eyes general manager Cara Gardner-Murray announcing she's stepping into the head coaching role while the league looks to fill the GM role moving forward. Prior to joining the Vancouver Golden Eyes, she was the head coach at Princeton for 14 seasons, where she coached Golden Eyes player Claire Thompson, finishing as the second winningest coach in program history. This transition makes sense, and there's really no one better for the role than Cara, as she knows the team she has built and put together and knows what she had in mind while bringing these players in. On top of the announcement, they also announced the additions of Laura Foucault from the SWHL and Dominika Laskova from the Montreal Victoire. To balance the shakeup that has come through the expansion process, some teams have begun signing their draft picks, though they have been coming in a lot slower than in previous years. And with this year's stacked draft class, it's come as a shock to many. This year, Tessa Janicki became the first draft pick to sign when she inked a 2-year deal with Las Vegas. Janicki kickstarted the USA's golden run, scoring the golden goal at the 2025 IIHF Women's World Championship before the USA went on to complete the first ever full series sweep in the rivalry series, and her debut at the 2026 Milano Cortina Games, where the USA won a perfect gold. With the Olympic win, Janicki became the first Penn State athlete to win a Winter Olympic gold medal in a collegiate career for the record books. In her time with the Nittany Lions, she beat the all-time scoring record, men's and women's, with 201 points, set the program record for goals with 89 and assists with 117, as well as a plus 112 through 145 games. Janicki brings a strong offensive presence to one of the league's newest teams, and it is no surprise that they wasted no time putting pen to paper. The second draft signing, also out of Penn State, was defender Leah Stecker, who signed a 3-year deal with the Boston Fleet. Stecker finished her senior season with 20 points and 32 blocks and joins a strong defensive core alongside Rookie of the Year Haley Wynn and Defender of the Year Megan Keller. Stecker is in good hands as she learns the ropes in the PWHL. Next was the Minnesota Frost signing their fifth-round pick, Daria Grezden, a Russian goalkeeper who at just 22 years old has 7 years of professional experience in the ZHL. Over the past 3 seasons, the Frost have split their net between Maddie Rooney and Nicole Hensley. However, in expansion, lost Hensley to Vegas, leaving the Frost looking for another strong presence in net. The interchangeability of their goalies has been Minnesota's biggest advantage, giving their goalies more recovery time without the team taking a hit in the standings. It also paid off in their back-to-back championship run, with each Rooney and Hensley taking the net in both runs, performing better against different teams. The Frost are likely looking to replicate this, and with Gresden's experience in net, expect to see her throughout the season. Most recently was PWHL Detroit announcing the signing of their first ever draft pick, goaltender Andrea Brand-Lee. Brand-Lee is a 3-time Olympian, last appearing in Switzerland's bronze medal win at the 2026 Olympic Games, bringing home their first medal in 12 years. She has been playing in the SDHL, most recently with Frölunda Hockey Club, where she has a league-leading 945 save percentage. Alongside Brand-Lee was the announcement of Michigan native Casey Borgel signing a 1-year deal out of Colgate University, where she finished the last 2 seasons as the top scoring defender for the program. Borgel also already has experience being coached by Detroit's assistant coach Molly Engstrom last year when she represented the U.S. in the 2025 Collegiate Series against Canada. While the draft signings are rolling in slowly, do not fret. A lot of teams have in the past have waited to sign their draft picks until training camp, and with this year's roster limitations ahead of camp, this is only amplified as teams have to manage free agency, draft picks, and their current teams and their re-signings from last season. And rounding out today's podcast is a first of its kind contract. Recently, former Victoire forward and Walter Cup champion Maya Labad stepped into the spotlight with a unique contract signing with Lausanne Hockey Club in Switzerland's PFWL that could mark the way forward for the PWHL and other women's leagues. While the PWHL has continued to grow since its inaugural season, now with double the teams and double the talent, there still isn't enough room for everyone. And while other pro leagues like the NHL have farm teams that allow talent to develop, give players a slower return from injury, and give teams a wide selection of call-ups, the PWHL is still new and hasn't been able to build the system, which has left players heading overseas to compete in a wide variety of leagues. But Labad's contract may have solved this problem, at least in the short term. The contract includes an out clause that allows her to attend Las Vegas's training camp, and if she doesn't earn a PWHL contract, she'll be able to return to Lausanne for the remainder of the PFWL season. If the PWHL could form a partnership overseas with these leagues to act as their development pipeline, the European seasons typically begin earlier than the PWHL, allowing depth players valuable ice time to prepare ahead of PWHL camps. So if the PWHL could form partnerships overseas with these leagues, the development pipeline only grows and increases the talent pool in which all leagues can select from. So far this offseason, we have seen quite a few undrafted prospects sign overseas, especially coming out of U Sports, with only 2 selections in the draft, with Grace Elliott being selected by the Seattle Torrent and Emily Lavoie being selected by the Montreal Victoire. While there were a lot of Canadian prospects selected, they were still coming out of the NCAA, which isn't realistic for everyone. In the first few years of the PWHL, we have seen them break for several international competitions, including the IIHF, Women's World Championship, Rivalry Series, and Olympics, which leaves an interesting question. If the Euro leagues could develop a league-wide break to allow players to participate in PWHL training camps before resuming their season. With no current public talks of a farm or development system, this could be the path forward, benefiting all leagues. as the PWHL would have access to international talent that may have been passed over in the draft, while the Euro leagues can scout talent that will be available after roster cuts are made for player replacements or reinforcements. With the current pathway in women's hockey jumping from college to the pros, a partnership between the Euros and the PWHL may be the short term solution for developing players and creating more opportunities. That's all for this week's episode. Make sure to subscribe and follow Beck Point Media on socials to stay up to date on the latest news in women's hockey.